They saw a woman standing alone with a dog that did not bark. That was their first mistake. The shove came without warning. One moment, Kira Vaughn stood near the edge of the parking lot, processing the afternoon's guest registration for the Heritage Day Festival. The next, a hand connected with her shoulder, pushing her backward with enough force to make her stumble half a step before she caught her balance. "Hey there, sweetheart." The voice belonged to a young man with a gimbal-mounted phone, the red recording light already blinking. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or, should I say, dog got your tongue?" His friends laughed, 4 of them in total, circling like predators who had spotted something vulnerable at the edge of the herd. The leader stepped closer, emboldened by her silence, by the lack of screaming or crying or any of the reactions that usually made these encounters entertaining. Kira did not move, did not speak, did not do anything except breathe in a pattern that most people would never notice. 4 counts in through the nose. Hold for 4. 4 counts out through the mouth. Hold for 4. The dog beside her sat in perfect stillness. No growl, no bark, no visible tension in the muscles or warning in the eyes. Just observation, assessment, the kind of patience that came from training most civilians could not imagine. "She's ignoring us," one of the others said, positioning himself for a better camera angle. "Classic Karen move. Thinks she's too good to talk to us." "Nah, she's scared." The leader reached toward her again, this time aiming for the collar of her jacket. "Look at her, frozen solid. Probably never had anyone push back in her whole..." "Don't." The single word stopped in mid-motion, not because of volume. Kira's voice emerged barely above a whisper, but there was something in it, some quality of absolute certainty that made his hand hesitate in the air between them. "Don't touch me again." The leader recovered quickly, converting his hesitation into a laugh for the camera. "Or what? Your little doggy is going to protect you?" He looked at the animal, at its complete lack of visible aggression. "Doesn't look very scary to me. Doesn't look like much of anything." 60 feet away, near the veterans' recruitment booth, a man in a chapter vest stopped mid-conversation and turned his head toward the parking lot. Roy Garrett was 62 years old, with a face like weathered leather and hands that remembered 30 years of naval service, including 8 with the Special Warfare K-9 unit. He had trained with dogs that could take down armed combatants in 3 seconds, had worked with handlers who could control those animals with a glance, a breath, a shift in posture so subtle that observers missed it entirely. He knew what discipline looked like. And what he was seeing right now, the absolute stillness of that woman and that dog, the complete absence of panic or defensive posturing or any of the normal human reactions to threat, made his pulse tick faster. "That's not a pet," he said quietly, more to himself than to his companions. "That's not a pet at all." He started walking toward the parking lot, then stopped when the woman spoke again. "Your camera is recording." Her voice carried across the distance, calm and measured. "Everything you do, everything you say, all of it documented." The leader's smirk faltered. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then he rallied, playing to his audience. "Good. Let people see what happens when Karen thinks she's special." He reached for her collar. She did not resist, did not strike or grab or defend in any way that could be captured and weaponized. She simply stood there, as his fingers closed on fabric, as he gave a small shake designed to humiliate rather than harm, as his friends recorded every second. And the dog did not move. That was the terrifying part. Any other animal, any pet or poorly trained protection dog, would have reacted, would have barked, lunged, shown teeth. This one sat in perfect stillness, demonstrating a level of control that turned the leader's display of dominance into something pathetic. Roy Garrett reached them just as the leader released her collar with a small shove. "That's enough." His voice carried the authority of decades in special operations. "Step away from her, now." The group turned toward him, saw the veteran's vest, the chapter patches, the way he positioned himself at an angle that gave him sight lines to all 4 of them, while keeping the woman in his peripheral vision. "Who are you?" the leader demanded. "Her boyfriend?" Roy ignored the question. His eyes had moved to the dog, studying it with the recognition of someone who had spent years working with exactly this type of animal. "That's not a pet," he said. The words landed like stones in still water. "That's not a pet at all. That's discipline." The statement hung in the air, incomprehensible to the young men, but absolutely clear to anyone who understood what they were actually looking at. "What are you talking about, old man?" "I'm talking about the fact that you just put your hands on someone while her working dog watched and did nothing. Because she told it to do nothing. Because she has that level of control. Roy's voice dropped. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what kind of training produces that result? The leader opened his mouth to respond, but something in Roy's expression made the words die in his throat. Walk away, Roy said quietly, right now, while walking is still an option. They walked, not as quickly as they had arrived, not with the same swagger, but they retreated toward the main festival area with backward glances and muttered commentary. The camera kept rolling, but the energy had shifted from entertainment to something closer to confusion. When they were gone, Roy turned to the woman. You all right? Yes. Her breathing had not changed throughout the entire encounter. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out, hold. Thank you for intervening. Didn't do much, just gave you an exit ramp. He studied her face, the controlled expression that revealed nothing of what she might be feeling underneath. That's real training, isn't it? Not civilian obedience school. The real thing. She met his eyes but did not answer. I spent 8 years with Nisapkaya Frey 9, Roy continued. I know what discipline looks like. I know what control looks like. And I know the difference between someone who owns a dog and someone who handles a working animal. He paused. You're not just a handler, are you? Before she could respond, a phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, glanced at the screen, and something shifted in her expression. I have to go, she said. My niece is performing soon. Of course. Roy reached into his vest pocket, produced a card. If those idiots cause problems, if that video becomes something you need to address, I saw everything. Both incidents. I can make a statement. She took the card, studied it for a moment, then nodded once. A military acknowledgement, precise and economical. Thank you, Master Chief. She walked toward the main festival area, the dog flowing beside her in perfect formation. Roy watched her go, and the feeling in his gut did not ease. Something was coming. He could feel it. And it had started long before that confrontation in the parking lot, 4 hours earlier. The festival grounds sprawled across Riverside Community Park like a patchwork quilt of American summer. Booth canopies in red and white lined the central pathway. The smell of kettle corn drifted through humid air. Children's laughter punctuated the steady thrum of a cover band murdering classic rock somewhere near the main stage. 3,000 people had gathered for the annual Heritage Day celebration. Families spreading blankets on grass still damp from morning sprinklers. Teenagers clustering near the food trucks. Veterans in their chapter vests manning recruitment tables beneath canvas awnings that snapped in the occasional breeze. Kira Vaughn arrived at 10:45 a.m. She parked in the secondary lot, away from the main entrance, choosing a spot that offered clear sight lines to multiple exits. The habit was automatic, ingrained by 6 years of service in environments where such awareness meant survival. The dog, a Belgian Malinois named Atlas, exited the vehicle with the controlled precision of an animal that understood the difference between work and rest. His posture shifted as he scanned the parking area, cataloging threats and exits and variables that most people would never notice. Easy, Kira said quietly. We're here for Emma. That's all. Her niece would perform with the youth choir at 2:15 p.m. Until then, Kira intended to remain on the margins, visible enough to fulfill family obligations, distant enough to avoid the social interactions that still felt foreign after years of deployment. Her sister-in-law Sarah had insisted she attend. Emma talks about you constantly. She wants her Aunt Kira to see her sing. You can't keep hiding forever. Hiding. That was one word for it. Another might be recovering, processing. Learning how to exist in a world where the skills that had kept her alive were no longer necessary, and where the instincts that had protected her team now manifested as hypervigilance in grocery stores and coffee shops. She walked the perimeter of the festival grounds, mapping the layout the way she had mapped forward operating bases. Main entrance to the north, secondary access points at the east and west, emergency vehicle routes along the southern boundary. Food vendors clustered near the center, with children's activities on the eastern side and the main stage to the west. The youth choir would perform on a small platform near the children's area, safe, supervised, far from any of the crowds or noise that might trigger the responses she worked daily to suppress. Aunt Kira! The voice cut through her tactical assessment, replacing it with something warmer. Emma sprinted across the grass, arms outstretched, colliding with Kira's legs in a hug that nearly knocked her off balance. You came! You really came. I promised, didn't I? Kira knelt to Emma's level, one hand briefly touching the child's hair. I wouldn't miss this for anything. Can I pet Atlas? Emma's eyes had already moved to the dog, who had assumed a relaxed sitting position beside Kira. Please, he's so pretty. What do we say first? I ask you, then I let him sniff my hand, then I pet him on the side, not the head. Emma recited the rules with the practiced ease of repetition. Can I? Kira nodded, and Emma extended her small hand toward Atlas. The dog sniffed it briefly, then allowed the child to stroke his flank with the patient tolerance of an animal that understood the difference between threat and friendship. Sarah approached more slowly, carrying a cooler bag and wearing the harried expression of a parent managing too many logistics. Thanks for coming. She's been asking about you all week. Wouldn't have missed it. How are you doing? Really? The question carried layers that simple words could not convey. Sarah knew about the deployments, knew about the classified work that Kira could never discuss, knew about the transition challenges that had brought her sister-in-law home quieter and more guarded than the woman who had left 6 years earlier. I'm managing, Kira said. Getting better. Is the program helping? Some. The therapy, the group sessions, the careful work of learning to live without adrenaline as a constant companion. It's a process. Well, you look good. Sarah smiled, the expression genuine despite its slight awkwardness. Emma has to report to the choir staging area at 1:45. You're welcome to sit with me and watch, or I'll find my own spot, less crowded. Of course. Sarah did not push. She had learned, over the months of Kira's return, that some distances needed to be respected. We'll find you after? I'll be here. Emma hugged her once more, then bounced off with her mother toward the activities area. Kira watched them go, something tight in her chest easing at the simple normalcy of the interaction. This was what coming home was supposed to feel like. Family, community, a festival on a summer afternoon with no threat beyond sunburn and long lines for snow cones. She found a bench near the edge of the activities area, positioned with clear sight lines to the choir platform and easy access to multiple exit routes. Atlas settled beside her, his attention divided between the surrounding crowd and Kira's subtle cues. The hours passed slowly. Kira observed the festival's rhythms, the ebb and flow of families and couples and groups of teenagers, the patterns of movement that revealed nothing more threatening than ordinary human congregation. At 1:30 p.m., her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a photo. The frame showed her, clearly identifiable, standing near the parking lot where she had arrived that morning. The angle suggested a telephoto lens, someone watching from a distance. No accompanying text. Just the image and its implicit message. We see you. Kira's breathing remained steady. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out, hold. She saved the photo to her files and continued scanning the festival grounds. 20 minutes later, a second message arrived. Saw you talking to that old veteran guy, making friends? That's cute. She did not respond. Instead, she opened a mapping application on her phone and studied the layout of the festival grounds, identifying the angles from which those photos might have been taken. The gimbal group. The young men from the parking lot. They were watching her, tracking her movements, building towards something. At 1:42 p.m., her phone buzzed again. Heading toward the back of the stage area, nice and quiet back there, lots of privacy. Kira looked toward the choir platform where Emma would perform in 33 minutes. The staging area was on the opposite side of the grounds, safely distant from whatever confrontation these individuals were engineering. Good. She stood, signaled Atlas with a subtle gesture, and began walking toward the rear of the stage area. The path led away from the main crowds, between equipment trucks and portable facilities, into a corridor that offered exactly what the message had promised: privacy, isolation, distance from witnesses. She was walking into their trap. And she was doing it deliberately. Because Kira Vaughn understood something that her pursuers did not. The skills that had kept her alive in Afghanistan and Syria, and a dozen other places she could never name, those skills included the ability to control an encounter, to choose the ground, to shape the conditions of engagement so that the outcome was never in doubt. They thought they were hunting her. They were wrong. Her phone buzzed one final time as she entered the narrow corridor behind the main stage. We see you, Karen. Coming to say hello. She stopped walking, positioned herself with a clear sight line to the corridor entrance and an emergency exit route toward the main road. Atlas settled into a modified guard position, alert but controlled, waiting for commands that might never come. 30 seconds later, they appeared. the same four from the parking lot, approaching with renewed confidence. The gimbal operator led the group, camera already rolling, the red light blinking like an accusation. Well, well, the leader spread his arms in mock welcome. She actually showed up. Thought you might run and hide after this morning. I'm attending my niece's performance, Kira said. Her voice remained level, stripped of inflection. You're blocking my path. We're standing in a public area, just like you taught us earlier. He stepped closer, his friends fanning out to create a loose perimeter. Free country, right? We can go wherever we want. What do you want? Content? The word carried ugly implications. Our video from this morning is already getting views. People love watching Karens get put in their place. But the footage wasn't quite dramatic enough. We need better material. So, you followed me here. We were already here. You came to us. The leader shrugged. Convenient, right? Almost like fate. Kira said nothing. Her breathing continued its steady rhythm. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out, hold. Here's what's going to happen, the leader continued, emboldened by her silence. You're going to stand there while we ask you some questions, on camera, and you're going to answer them, or we're going to make this a lot more uncomfortable for you. And if I refuse, then we follow you, all day. Document everything you do. Make sure everyone at this nice family festival knows exactly what kind of person you are. He smiled. How would your niece feel about that? Having her aunt go viral as the crazy dog lady who threatens innocent content creators? The mention of Emma landed like a blade between ribs. Kira's expression did not change, but something shifted in the quality of her stillness. Leave my family out of this. Then cooperate. Simple as that. The gimbal operator circled to her left. Another of the group moved to the right. Classic flanking pattern, instinctive rather than trained. They were creating a box, limiting her options, demonstrating the kind of spatial dominance that usually worked on civilians. Kira remained motionless. First question, the leader said, pulling out his own phone to record from a second angle. What gives you the right to bring an aggressive animal to a family event? Atlas is not aggressive. He looked pretty aggressive this morning. He sat still. He did nothing. Exactly. The leader's smile widened. That's weird, right? Normal dogs would react, would bark or growl or something. Your dog just watched, like he was waiting for a signal, like he was trained to attack on command. He's trained to follow commands. That includes the command to remain calm. So, you admit he's trained for violence? I admit he's trained. Period. The way all working dogs are trained. Working dogs. The leader exchanged glances with his friends. What kind of work does he do? Kira did not answer. What kind of work do you do? Silence. Come on, Karen. The people want to know. What makes you so special that you need a scary dog following you around? What are you afraid of? One of the others, the youngest of the group, had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort. Dude, maybe we should... Shut up. The leader did not take his eyes off Kira. She's about to tell us something good. I can feel it. He stepped closer, close enough that the camera would capture every detail of the confrontation. Close enough that his physical presence became a form of pressure, an implicit threat wrapped in the language of documentation. Last chance, he said quietly. Tell us something interesting, or this gets a lot worse. Kira met his eyes. Hold them. You want something interesting? Her voice remained level, but something in its quality had changed. Here's something interesting. The fact that you're recording does not protect you. It documents your behavior, every word you've said, every step you've taken. All of it is preserved. Preserved for what? Evidence. The word landed like a physical blow. The leader's confidence flickered, uncertainty creeping into his expression. Evidence of what? We haven't done anything illegal. You followed me across a public venue after I explicitly told you to leave me alone. You've made threatening statements about my family. You've created a situation designed to provoke a response that you can then edit and distribute to damage my reputation. Kira paused. In legal terms, that's harassment. In some jurisdictions, it approaches stalking. That's nonsense. We're just making content. Content that requires a target. Content that depends on my distress for its entertainment value. Content that you've pursued across multiple locations over multiple hours. She gestured toward the camera. All of it documented. By you. The leader opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a voice cut through the tension from behind the group. Is everything all right here? Roy Garrett stood at the entrance to the corridor. his posture casual but his eyes sharp. He had followed the situation from a distance, watching the group trail Kira across the festival grounds, waiting for the moment when intervention became necessary. "This doesn't concern you," the leader said without turning around. "I think it does." Roy walked forward, positioning himself at an angle that disrupted their perimeter. "I think it concerns me a lot, actually, because I've been watching you boys follow this woman for the past hour, and what I've seen looks a lot like organized harassment. We're journalists. We have a right to... You have a right to document public events. You don't have a right to hunt people." Roy's voice hardened. "And you definitely don't have a right to threaten someone's family." The group shifted uneasily. The dynamic had changed with Roy's arrival. 4 against 1 was entertainment. 4 against 2, with one of those two being a veteran who clearly knew how to handle himself, was a different calculation entirely. "We're done here anyway," the leader said, backing toward the corridor exit. "Got plenty of footage. The internet will decide who's right." "The internet sees what you show it," Roy replied, "but courts see everything, including the parts you edit out." The group retreated, their swagger diminished but not eliminated. They would regroup, reconsider, probably edit their footage to remove anything that made them look like the aggressors they were. When they were gone, Roy turned to Kira. "That's twice now. You have a talent for attracting trouble. They targeted me. I didn't seek them out. No. You just walked into their trap deliberately." Roy studied her face. "I saw you check your phone. Saw you read something that made you change direction and head straight here. You knew they were waiting." Kira said nothing. "You wanted the confrontation. Wanted them to escalate on camera." Roy shook his head slowly. "That's tactical thinking. That's not how civilians operate. I'm not a civilian." "I gathered that." He paused. "Are you going to tell me what you are?" Before Kira could respond, a new sound cut through the afternoon air. Sirens, approaching rapidly from the direction of the main road. Someone had called the police. The next 20 minutes unfolded with the procedural efficiency of law enforcement responding to a public disturbance. 2 patrol cars arrived at the festival's secondary entrance. Officers spoke to witnesses, reviewed footage, and took statements from multiple parties. Kira stood beside the equipment truck where the confrontation had occurred, answering questions with the precise, minimal responses of someone who understood exactly how these situations worked. "Can you describe what happened, ma'am?" "A group of individuals followed me from the parking lot. They made threatening statements. They blocked my path and attempted to provoke a response." "Did they touch you?" "One of them grabbed my collar and shook me, earlier today in the parking lot." "Did you make any threats toward them?" "No." "Did your dog make any aggressive moves?" "No." He remained in a controlled position throughout both incidents. The officer, a woman in her mid-30s with sergeant stripes and a skeptical expression, studied Atlas with the wariness of someone who had dealt with animal-related complaints before. "That's a Belgian Malinois, correct?" "Yes. Those are often used as police and military working dogs." "They are." "Is this animal registered?" "Yes. Licensed and microchipped. I have documentation." Kira produced her phone, pulled up a folder of files. Registration, vaccination records, training certifications. The officer scrolled through them, her expression shifting from skepticism to something more neutral. "You're a veteran." 6 years, Naval Special Warfare." The sergeant looked up sharply. "Navy? Handler Specialty. Canine Operations." A long pause. The sergeant glanced at her partner, then back at Kira. Something in the air had changed, the way it always changed when people learned the truth about what she had done and where she had been. "Ma'am, I need to inform you that the individuals in question have filed a complaint alleging that you threatened them with your animal." "I did not." "They have video footage that they claim supports their version of events." "I'm sure they do, edited to remove context." Roy Garrett stepped forward, his veteran's vest prominently displayed. "Officer, I witnessed both confrontations today. I'm a retired Master Chief with 30 years of service, including 8 with the K9 unit. What I saw was a textbook example of harassment, with the woman and her animal demonstrating remarkable restraint. You're a witness? I'm whatever you need me to be." Roy produced his own identification, military ID, and civilian credentials. "I can provide a formal statement, I can testify if this goes further, and I can tell you, with the authority of someone who spent years training working dogs and their handlers, that what happened here was not aggression, it was discipline." The sergeant studied both of them for a long moment. Then she nodded. "We'll need formal statements from both of you. The festival security office has a room we can use." "Of course," Kira said. As they walked toward the security office, a young woman approached from the direction of the nearby booth area. She was perhaps 25, carrying a tablet and wearing a staff badge for one of the festival vendors. "Excuse me, officers?" The sergeant turned. "Yes? I have footage from my booth." The young woman looked nervous but determined. "I was recording for our social media, and I caught some of what happened. The whole thing, I think. Not just the part they want you to see." She turned the tablet around. The screen showed a video file, time-stamped from earlier that afternoon. In it, clearly visible, the group of young men could be seen approaching Kira in the parking lot. Their postures are aggressive. Their words are audible. The leader reached toward her, grabbing her jacket, shaking her. And through it all, Kira stood still. Atlas sitting motionless, no aggression, no threat. Nothing but a woman and her dog enduring harassment with supernatural calm. "Can you send that to our office?" the sergeant asked. "Already done." The young woman handed over a card. "My contact information, whatever you need." The interviews took 45 minutes. When they were finished, the sergeant found Kira in the hallway outside the security office. "Ma'am, based on the evidence we've gathered, including the booth footage, we're not pursuing any action against you. In fact, we're considering whether the individuals who filed the complaint might face charges for filing a false report." "I appreciate that. However, you should know that the original video has already been posted online. It's been edited in ways that misrepresent what happened. Once something like that is out there..." The sergeant shook her head. "I've seen these situations escalate. People make assumptions. They find addresses, phone numbers. They decide to take matters into their own hands." "I understand. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Someone who can be with you?" "I'll be fine." The sergeant looked like she wanted to say more, but Kira's expression offered no invitation for further discussion. "If anything happens, anything at all, call us immediately. And Ms. Vaughn?" The sergeant met her eyes. "Thank you for your service. What you did overseas matters. Don't let some idiots with cameras make you forget that." Kira nodded once, the acknowledgement of one professional to another. Outside the security office, Roy was waiting. "Choir performance was 15 minutes ago. Your niece is already finished." Something cold settled in Kira's chest. She had missed it. While dealing with police and statements and the aftermath of a confrontation she had not wanted, Emma had performed without her. "I'll explain to her later," Kira said quietly. "Want me to walk you back to your car?" "No. Thank you, Master Chief, for everything." She paused. "You asked earlier what I am. The answer is complicated, but I can tell you this. I'm not looking for trouble. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to find my way back to something like normal life." "Normal's overrated," Roy smiled slightly, "but I understand the goal." They parted at the edge of the festival grounds. Kira walked toward her vehicle, Atlas matching her pace stride for stride, and she did not look back at the crowds or the booths or the stage where her niece had performed without her. She had almost reached her car when Sarah intercepted her. "Where were you?" Her sister-in-law's voice carried equal parts worry and frustration. "Emma kept looking for you in the audience. She was devastated when you weren't there. There was an incident. I had to give a statement to the police." "An incident? What kind of incident?" "Some people followed me, harassed me. It escalated." Sarah's expression shifted from frustration to concern. "Are you okay? Was anyone hurt?" "I'm fine. No one was hurt." Kira paused. "I'm sorry about Emma. I'll make it up to her." "You always say that." The words came out sharper than Sarah probably intended. "You always say you will make it up, but then something else happens. Another incident, another complication, another reason why you can't just be here." "I know." "Do you?" Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what it's like for Emma, for me, watching you struggle and not being able to help? Wanting you to be part of our family again, but never knowing if today's going to be the day something goes wrong." Kira had no answer. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the things that could not be said. "I'm sorry," Sarah finally said, wiping her eyes. "That wasn't fair. You're dealing with things I can't imagine. I just wish..." "I know what you wish." Kira's voice was gentle. "I wish it too." They stood there for a moment longer, two women connected by family and separated by experiences that would never fully translate. Then Sarah nodded and walked back toward the festival, leaving Kira alone in the parking lot. She was almost to her car when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a military domain, official formatting, the kind of call that came with implications attached. Ms. Vaughn, this is Commander Davis, Naval Special Warfare K-9 Transition Program. Kira stopped walking. Yes, ma'am. I'm calling because we've become aware of a situation involving you earlier today, a confrontation at a public event that was recorded and distributed online. The footage is edited. It misrepresents what happened. We know. We've seen the unedited version, including the booth recording that captures the full context. A pause. Ms. Vaughn, what you demonstrated today was exactly what we're looking for in our instructor candidates. Excuse me? Control, discipline, the ability to manage a high-pressure situation without escalation. You had every justification for a defensive response, and you chose de-escalation instead. Your animal followed your lead perfectly. Commander Davis's voice carried something that might have been admiration. That's rare, especially in situations where most people would have reacted emotionally. I don't understand what you're asking. I'm asking if you'd be interested in a position with our transition program. We're developing a curriculum to help military working dogs integrate into civilian environments. Handlers, too. Teaching proper protocols, building bridges between military discipline and civilian expectations. The commander paused. Your background, your experience, your demonstrated ability to maintain control under pressure, you're exactly what we need. Kira leaned against her car, processing the offer. After everything that had happened today, after the harassment and the police and the misperformance and the tension with Sarah, someone was calling to tell her that her skills mattered, that what she had learned in war could serve a purpose in peace. There's a catch, Commander Davis continued. You'd have to recertify first. Civilian standards. There's a board that evaluates military handlers transitioning to civilian work. What kind of board? 5 evaluators. Experts in animal behavior, civilian dog handling, legal compliance. They review your methods, observe your control, and determine whether military training translates appropriately to civilian contexts. And if they decide it doesn't, then you don't get certified, and the program loses credibility. A longer pause. I won't lie to you, Ms. Vaughn. The board is skeptical of people with your background. They assume military training means aggressive training, that handlers like you create dangerous animals. That's not accurate. I know it's not, but you'd have to prove it, under conditions that will be specifically designed to challenge your approach. Kira looked at Atlas, at the discipline and trust they had built together through years of service in situations that most people would never understand. When? Originally, 3 weeks. But given the attention your situation is receiving online, the board has accelerated their timeline. They want to evaluate you within 10 days. They're setting me up to fail. Possibly. But Ms. Vaughn, if you pass under these conditions, under this scrutiny, with this much attention, no one can question the result. You become unimpeachable. The program becomes unimpeachable. Kira closed her eyes, breathed. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out, hold. I'll do it. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll send the details tonight. And Ms. Vaughn? Yes? What you did today mattered, not just for yourself, for every military dog and handler trying to find their place in civilian life. You showed them that discipline doesn't have to mean aggression, that strength can look like stillness. The call ended, Kira stood in the parking lot, phone in hand, watching the festival continue in the distance without her. 10 days. An accelerated evaluation by a skeptical board, online attention that would only intensify, all of it building toward a certification that would determine not just her future, but the future of hundreds of dogs and handlers like her. I don't need to win here, she said quietly, to herself, to Atlas, to the universe. I just need them to remember the lesson. She got in her car and drove toward whatever came next. The road ahead was uncertain. But Kira Vaughn had spent years walking into uncertainty, had learned to navigate darkness and danger and impossible odds, had survived situations that would have broken most people because she understood something that her critics and her harassers and her skeptics would never grasp. True strength is not the ability to dominate. True strength is the discipline to choose when not to. They had hit her in front of her dog, and they were about to learn exactly who its master was. The days that followed moved with the relentless precision of a countdown timer. Kira spent the first 48 hours managing the digital fallout. The edited video had spread beyond the original platform, migrating to reaction channels and aggregation sites where context went to die. Someone had assembled a dossier of her personal information, posting her neighborhood, her vehicle description, speculations about her employment that ranged from wildly inaccurate to disturbingly close. The threatening messages arrived in waves. Anonymous accounts with cartoon avatars promising consequences. Strangers who had watched 30 seconds of manipulated footage and decided they understood everything about her character. A few offered support, but they were drowned in the noise of manufactured outrage. On the third day, Commander Davis called with the evaluation details. The board meets in 7 days at the Naval Training Center. 5 evaluators, 3 hours of assessment. They'll observe your handling techniques, test your animal's responses to various stimuli, and interview you about your methods and philosophy. What should I expect? Skepticism. The board chair is Dr. Harold Pritchard. He's a civilian expert in animal behavior, highly respected in academic circles. He's also lost a family member to a dog attack years ago. That's not relevant to military working dogs. No, it's not. But trauma doesn't follow logic. He's voted against every military handler who's come before him. His position is that combat-trained animals can never fully integrate into civilian contexts. Kira absorbed this information. So, I'm not just proving my competence. I'm trying to change his mind about an entire category of service. That's about the size of it. Commander Davis paused. You can withdraw. No one would blame you. If I withdraw, what happens to the program? It loses momentum. The skeptics point to another military handler who couldn't meet civilian standards. Funding gets questioned. Other handlers see the writing on the wall and don't bother applying. Then withdrawal isn't an option. The preparation began immediately. Kira understood that the challenge ahead was not about training Atlas. 6 years of military service had already accomplished that. The dog could execute complex commands in combat conditions, maintain discipline under fire, distinguish between threat and non-threat with accuracy that exceeded most human judgment. The challenge was perception. She needed to demonstrate that military discipline translated to civilian safety, that control was not suppressed, that an animal trained for war could exist peacefully in a world that had never seen war's necessity. On the 4th day, she called Sarah. I need your help, and Emma's. The request was difficult to make. After the festival, after the missed performance and the tense conversation in the parking lot, Kira had kept her distance. Space for healing, time for the complications to settle. But this evaluation required something she could not manufacture alone. What kind of help? Sarah's voice carried cautious curiosity. The board is going to test Atlas's responses to children. They want to see how a military working dog behaves around vulnerable populations. Kira paused. I need Emma to be part of that demonstration, under completely controlled conditions, with you present, with safety protocols that I'll explain in detail. A long silence. Then, you want my daughter to approach a dog that's been trained for combat? I want Emma to approach a dog that's been trained for discipline. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Kira's voice softened. Sarah, I would never put Emma at risk. Never. What I'm asking is for her to demonstrate something that she already knows, something she's done dozens of times. The rules she learned about approaching Atlas, the respect she shows for his space, the way she interacts with him safely and appropriately. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. Atlas has been around Emma since she was 4 years old. He understands she's family. He understands she's not a threat. Kira paused. But if it makes you more comfortable, I'll have the board safety officer present. I'll have emergency protocols in place. I'll stop the demonstration at the first sign of any concern. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted from skepticism to something more complex. Emma talks about Atlas constantly. She tells her friends her aunt has a superhero dog. She doesn't see him as dangerous. She sees him as protective. He is protective. That's exactly the point I need to make. Let me talk to her. If she wants to do it, if she understands what's being asked, then we'll discuss it further. That's all I'm asking. The call ended. Kira sat in the silence of her small apartment, surrounded by the documentation she had assembled for the evaluation. Training records, behavioral assessments, letters of recommendation from commanding officers who had witnessed her work in environments that remained classified. None of it would matter if she could not change one man's mind. On the 5th night, sleep came reluctantly. When it finally arrived, it brought memories. The dream was not a dream. It was a replay, the kind that veterans learned to expect and civilians struggled to understand. Syria, 2 years ago. A compound outside Raqqa where intelligence suggested high-value targets were planning something catastrophic. Kira moved through the memory with the clarity of someone who had lived it so many times that the edges had worn smooth. The weight of her gear, the sound of her breathing in the helmet, the presence of Atlas beside her, his attention focused on the doorway ahead. The mission parameters were clear: breach, clear, extract. Simple words for complex violence that she had chosen not to remember in detail. What she remembered instead was the moment everything changed. They had cleared 3 rooms when Atlas stopped. Not a dramatic halt, not a visible signal of danger, just a shift in his posture that Kira had learned to read over years of partnership. Something was wrong. She raised her fist. The team behind her froze. Atlas moved forward, not toward the objective, but toward a side corridor that the original intelligence had marked as empty. His pace was measured, controlled, the gait of an animal following a scent trail that human senses could not detect. Kira followed, trust built through hundreds of training exercises and dozens of operations. If Atlas was moving, there was a reason. The corridor led to a storage room. The door was closed but not locked. Atlas positioned himself at the threshold, his body creating a barrier between Kira and whatever waited inside. She reached for the handle. Atlas nudged her hand away. Gentle pressure, insistent, redirecting her motion without resistance. She tried again. Same result. The third time she understood. He was not preventing her from entering. He was telling her to wait. 30 seconds later, the storage room door opened from the inside. A child emerged, 7 years old, maybe 8, eyes wide with terror, clutching something to her chest that Kira initially mistook for a doll. It was not a doll. The device was crude but functional. A vest, wired, with a trigger mechanism held in the child's trembling hands. Someone had sent her out as a distraction, a living obstacle designed to force a response that would either kill the child or compromise the mission. Atlas had known, had detected the explosive material, had prevented Kira from breaching into a kill zone while simultaneously blocking the child's path forward, creating a standoff that gave everyone time to think. The memory shifted. Kira talking to the child in broken Arabic, coaxing her to set down the trigger, explaining that no one would hurt her, that the scary dog was actually a protector, that everything would be okay if she just trusted. The child set down the trigger. The bomb squad arrived. The mission continued. Later, in the debrief, the commanding officer asked Kira how she had known to follow the dog instead of the original plan. "I didn't know," she had answered. "I trusted." Trusted what? Discipline, training, the understanding that Atlas perceives things I can't, that his judgment in certain situations exceeds my own. The commanding officer nodded slowly. That's not how most people think about working dogs. Most people haven't worked with one. Kira woke at 4:17 a.m., the memory fading, but its lesson remaining. Discipline was not about control. It was about partnership. About recognizing that strength took many forms, and that the most powerful response was sometimes no response at all. Atlas lifted his head from his position at the foot of the bed, watching her in the darkness. "I know," she said quietly. "We've got work to do." The evaluation facility occupied a converted warehouse at the edge of the Naval Training Center. The space had been arranged to simulate various civilian environments: a park setting with benches and walking paths, a simulated home interior with furniture and doorways, an outdoor area with obstacles and distractions. Kira arrived at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before her scheduled time. Sarah and Emma were already there, seated in the observation area behind reinforced glass. Emma waved frantically when she spotted her aunt. Kira raised her hand in response, the gesture carrying more weight than the child could understand. The board members filed in at 9 a.m. precisely. 5 evaluators, as Commander Davis had described, 3 women, 2 men, various backgrounds in animal behavior, veterinary medicine, civilian dog training, and legal compliance. Dr. Harold Pritchard sat at the center of the table. He was perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair and the kind of face that seemed permanently arranged into an expression of careful doubt. His credentials were impeccable. His bias was documented. His vote would likely determine the outcome. "Ms. Vaughn," Pritchard's voice was neutral, professional, revealing nothing of the preconceptions that Commander Davis had warned about. "Thank you for appearing before this board. Do you understand the purpose of today's evaluation?" "Yes, sir. To determine whether my handling methods and my animal's training meet civilian standards for integration into non-military contexts. Correct. We'll be observing several scenarios designed to test response, control, and judgment. You'll have opportunities to explain your approach and philosophy. At the conclusion, we'll deliberate and render a decision. He glanced at his fellow board members. Any questions before we begin? A woman to his left, Dr. Chen, according to her nameplate, leaned forward. Ms. Vaughn, I've reviewed your service record, impressive credentials, but I want to understand something fundamental. Military working dogs are trained for combat environments. They're conditioned to respond to threats with force. How do you reconcile that training with civilian safety requirements? Kira had prepared for this question. Dr. Chen, with respect, that characterization misunderstands how military working dogs are actually trained. The foundation is not aggression. The foundation is discipline. Explain. A combat-trained dog learns to distinguish between contexts, work mode and rest mode, threat and non-threat. The same animal that can take down an armed combatant can also sit calmly in a crowded space without reacting to ordinary stimuli. The training doesn't create aggression. It creates control over when and how aggression is deployed. And you believe that control translates to civilian settings? I know it does. I've lived it. Atlas has been in public spaces, around children, around crowds, for the past 18 months. No incidents, no complaints, complete behavioral compliance. Dr. Pritchard made a note on his tablet. His expression remained unreadable. The first scenario began at 9:20 a.m. The park simulation. Kira walked Atlas through the artificial environment while board members observed from various positions. Other handlers had been brought in to provide distractions. Dogs of different sizes and temperaments, people jogging past, simulated arguments at controlled distances. Atlas navigated each stimulus with calm proficiency. When another dog barked aggressively, he turned his head to assess, then returned his attention to Kira's subtle cues. When a jogger passed too close, he maintained his position without tensing. When voices raised in simulated conflict, his ears rotated toward the sound, but his body remained relaxed. Impressive control, Dr. Chen observed. How do you maintain that level of discipline without visible commands? Partnership, Kira answered. 6 years of working together. He reads my posture, my breathing, my attention. I read his. We communicate in ways that don't require words. Pritchard looked up from his notes. That sounds almost mystical, Ms. Vaughn. It's not mystical, sir. It's training. The same way a sports team develops nonverbal communication over seasons of practice. The same way married couples finish each other's sentences. Repetition builds understanding. Understanding builds trust. The second scenario tested home environment responses. Atlas was placed in the simulated living room while various visitors entered and exited. Mail carriers, delivery personnel, neighbors stopping by. Each interaction followed the same pattern. Alert assessment, relaxed response. No barking, no charging, no defensive posturing beyond appropriate awareness. What happens if someone actually threatens you in this environment? Pritchard asked. If someone breaks in with hostile intent? Then Atlas responds appropriately to the threat level. But the key word is appropriately. He doesn't escalate. He contains. He creates space for de-escalation or retreat. Violence is always the last option, not the first. You're confident about that? I'm certain about that, because I've trained him that way. Because that's how I was trained. Because the goal of every military operation I've ever been part of was mission completion with minimal casualties, not maximum destruction. Pritchard's pen stopped moving. Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. Miss Vaughn, I want to be direct with you. He set down his tablet, folded his hands on the table. I've voted against every military handler who has appeared before this board. My position has been that combat training creates behavioral patterns that cannot be fully suppressed in civilian contexts, that military dogs are fundamentally unsuitable for integration into normal society. The room went silent. The other board members exchanged glances. This was not standard evaluation protocol. I understand, sir. Do you? Do you understand what it's like to hold a family member while they bleed out because someone's disciplined animal decided they were a threat? Pritchard's voice remained steady, but something raw lurked beneath the professional surface. Do you understand what it's like to hear a mother explain to a child that daddy isn't coming home because a dog that was supposed to be safe wasn't? Kira met his eyes, held them. I understand loss, sir. Different circumstances, but the same weight. I've held friends while they died. I've written letters to families explaining why their loved ones weren't coming home. I've lived with the knowledge that my decisions, my timing, my judgment determined who survived and who didn't. Then you understand why I'm skeptical. I understand why you're afraid. The word landed carefully, without accusation. And I understand that fear doesn't respond to logic. It responds to evidence. So, I'm asking you to watch, to see, to judge not based on what you expect, but based on what actually happens. Pritchard was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded once. Proceed with the child interaction scenario. Sarah led Emma through the observation area door and into the evaluation space. The child was nervous but determined, holding her mother's hand while her eyes fixed on Atlas with a mixture of excitement and appropriate caution. Emma, Kira said gently, do you remember the rules? Ask first. Let him sniff. Pet on the side, not the head. Watch for his signals. Stop if he seems uncomfortable. Perfect. Whenever you're ready. Emma approached slowly, following the protocol she had learned over years of interaction. She stopped 3 feet from Atlas and extended her hand, palm down, fingers relaxed. Atlas sniffed her hand. His tail moved once, a subtle wag that indicated recognition and acceptance. Can I pet him now? Emma asked, looking at Kira for confirmation. Go ahead. The child stroked Atlas's flank with gentle pressure. The dog remained motionless except for the slight lean into her touch, the body language of an animal enjoying appropriate contact. He's so soft, Emma said, her nervousness dissolving into wonder. He always feels like a blanket. He likes you, Kira said. He knows your family. Dr. Chen had moved closer to observe the interaction. Ms. Vaughn, what would happen if the child made a sudden movement? If she fell against him or startled him unexpectedly? Atlas would adjust, move away if necessary, create space. His training includes response to unpredictable stimuli from non-threatening sources. He can distinguish between a child stumbling and an adult attacking. You're confident about that? Dr. Chen, Emma has been around Atlas since she was 4 years old. She's fallen into him, tripped over him, surprised him coming around corners. Not once has he responded with anything except patience and adjustment. Pritchard stood from his chair and walked toward the evaluation space. His movement was deliberate, his attention fixed on Atlas with an intensity that made Kira's instincts sharpen. Ms. Vaughn, I want to conduct an additional test. Something not in the standard protocol. What kind of test? A stress response evaluation. I want to see how your animal reacts to perceived threats against you, specifically. Kira's breathing remained steady. 4 counts in, hold. 4 counts out, hold. What did you have in mind? I'm going to approach you in a way that simulates aggressive intent. Not actual contact, just posture and movement that suggests threat. I want to observe your dog's response in real time. Sarah stepped forward immediately. Emma, come here, please. The child moved to her mother's side, sensing the shift in atmosphere without understanding its cause. They retreated to the observation area, behind the reinforced glass, safe from whatever was about to unfold. Are you sure about this, Dr. Pritchard? Dr. Chen asked. This goes beyond standard evaluation parameters. The standard parameters exist for standard situations. Ms. Vaughn is asking us to certify an extraordinary animal for extraordinary integration. I want to see what happens when that integration is tested. He turned to Kira. With your permission? Kira looked at Atlas. The dog had already shifted his attention to Pritchard, tracking the older man's movements with quiet alertness. No tension in his muscles, no warning in his posture, just observation. Proceed, she said. Pritchard began walking toward her. His pace accelerated with each step. His shoulders squared. His hands came up in a gesture that suggested grabbing or striking. Atlas rose from his sitting position. The room held its breath. Pritchard lunged forward, hands reaching toward Kira's collar in a motion that mimicked the harassment she had endured at the festival. Atlas moved, not toward Pritchard, not with aggression or threat. He simply positioned himself between the approaching man and Kira, creating a physical barrier that stopped forward momentum without contact. Pritchard pulled up short, nearly stumbling over the dog that had materialized in his path. Atlas stood motionless, looking up at him with eyes that carried no menace, only calm assessment. Stop, Kira said quietly. Atlas returned to her side and sat. The entire sequence had taken perhaps 3 seconds. No barking, no growling, no teeth, just precise positioning that neutralized the threat through presence alone. Pritchard stood in the middle of the evaluation space, breathing harder than the brief exertion warranted. His face had paled. His hands trembled slightly before he controlled them. He stopped, started again. That's not what I expected. What did you expect, sir? Aggression? Defensive violence? The response I've seen from other animals in similar situations. He looked at Atlas, still sitting calmly at Kira's side. He didn't try to hurt me, he just stopped me. That's the training, that's the discipline. Atlas understands his role as protection, not punishment. He creates space, he prevents escalation. He gives everyone involved the opportunity to make better choices. Pritchard returned to his seat slowly, his expression unreadable but clearly processing something significant. The other board members watched him, waiting for a signal about how to proceed. I have one more question, Ms. Vaughn. His voice had lost its edge, replaced by something that might have been genuine curiosity. In your service, in the situations you've faced, has this animal ever used lethal force? Yes. Under what circumstances? Kira considered how much to share. The details remained classified. The principal did not. In situations where human life was at immediate risk and no other option existed, when the choice was between violence and allowing innocent people to die, she paused. Dr. Pritchard, military working dogs are not machines. They're not weapons that fire indiscriminately. They're partners who understand context, who read situations, who make judgments about appropriate responses. Atlas has the capability to kill. He also has the training to know when killing is necessary and when it's not. And today, this test? Today, you approached with aggressive posture, but no weapon, no genuine threat to life. Atlas assessed, positioned, and waited. If you had continued, if you had actually tried to harm me, his response would have escalated proportionally, but only proportionally, only as much as necessary, never more. Pritchard nodded slowly. I think I understand. The deliberation took 23 minutes. Kira waited in the observation area with Sarah and Emma, watching through the glass as the 5 board members discussed, debated, and occasionally gestured with the kind of emphasis that suggested disagreement. Emma had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder. The stress of the morning, the unfamiliar environment, and the intensity of the interactions had exhausted her. Sarah stroked her daughter's hair while keeping her eyes fixed on the deliberating board. Whatever happens, Sarah said quietly, I'm proud of you. For what? For trying, for caring, for wanting to build something that helps people instead of just walking away. Sarah met her sister-in-law's eyes. I know I haven't always been supportive. I know I've been scared of what you went through and how it changed you. But watching you today, seeing how you handle yourself and how you've trained Atlas, I understand better now. Understand what? That discipline isn't about suppressing who you are. It's about channeling it, using it for something good. Before Kira could respond, the conference room door opened. Dr. Pritchard emerged first. His expression gave nothing away as he approached the observation area and gestured for Kira to follow him back to the evaluation space. The board members had resumed their positions at the table. The vote had been conducted. The decision had been made. Mrs. Vaughn, Pritchard began, his voice carrying the weight of official pronouncement, this board has evaluated your handling techniques, observed your animal's responses, and considered your testimony about training philosophy and methodology. Kira stood at attention, her posture military straight despite the civilian context. The vote was not unanimous. Pritchard paused, and something shifted in his expression. It was 4-1 in your favor. The words took a moment to register. Kira had prepared herself for rejection, for the fight that would follow, for the appeals process that Commander Davis had outlined as a contingency. The dissenting vote, Pritchard continued, was not mine. That registered even more slowly. Dr. Pritchard, I was wrong. The admission came without fanfare, without qualification. I walked into this evaluation with preconceptions based on personal tragedy rather than professional assessment. I expected to see confirmation of everything I believed about military working dogs. Instead, I saw something that challenged those beliefs fundamentally. He stood, walked around the table, approached her with the measured steps of someone who had made a difficult journey and wanted to acknowledge its completion. What you demonstrated today was not suppressed aggression waiting to explode. It was a genuine partnership, genuine discipline, The kind of control that comes from trust and training rather than fear and dominance. He extended his hand. I apologize for my bias, and I recommend your certification without reservation. Kira shook his hand. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Prove me right. Build the program you've described. Train the handlers and the dogs who need what you can teach. Show the world that military service doesn't end when deployment does. The formal certification would take 3 days to process. The paperwork, the documentation, the official stamps that transformed evaluation results into legal authorization. But the real victory had already been achieved. Commander Davis called that evening with congratulations and next steps. The instructor position was confirmed. The program had funding for 18 months. The first cohort of military working dogs awaiting transition would arrive in 4 weeks. One more thing, Commander Davis added. The video from the festival, the edited one that started all this trouble. Kira tensed. What about it? Our public affairs office wants to use it. Not the edited version, the full footage from the booth recording. They want to make it part of the program's training curriculum. A case study in appropriate response to harassment. A demonstration of exactly the kind of discipline we're trying to teach. They want to use the worst day of my recent life as educational material. They want to use your finest moment as proof of what military handlers are capable of. The restraint, the control, the refusal to escalate despite provocation. Commander Davis paused. You turned a negative into a credential, Vaughn. That's exactly the kind of transformation this program is built to achieve. Kira considered this. The video that had been weaponized against her, repurposed as evidence of her professionalism, the harassment that had threatened her reputation, becoming a teaching tool that would help others navigate similar situations. All right, she said, use it. 2 weeks later, a detective from the local police department contacted her. Ms. Vaughn, I'm calling about the individuals who harassed you at the Heritage Day Festival. We've completed our investigation, and I wanted to update you on our findings. I'm listening. The group has been identified and interviewed. During that process, we discovered this wasn't an isolated incident. They've been conducting similar harassment campaigns against multiple targets over the past 18 months. Filming confrontations, editing footage to misrepresent events, posting content designed to damage reputations and generate engagement. A pattern, a significant pattern. We're working with the district attorney's office on potential charges, harassment, stalking, filing false reports. The severity depends on how many victims are willing to participate in prosecution. Kira thought about the threatening messages she had received, the doxing, the strangers who had decided she was a villain based on 30 seconds of manipulated footage. How many other victims are there? At least 7 that we've identified so far, possibly more. And if I participate, if I testify about what happened to me, it strengthens the case considerably. You have documentation, witnesses, the booth footage that contradicts their narrative. Your military background gives you credibility that some other victims might lack. Kira closed her eyes, breathed, the familiar pattern that had carried her through every difficult decision. If I stay silent, she said slowly, other people will pay the price. Other targets who don't have witnesses or footage or backgrounds that make them credible. That's one way to look at it. It's the only way to look at it. She opened her eyes. I'll testify, whatever you need. Thank you, Ms. Vaughn. The DA's office will be in touch with details. The call ended. Kira sat in her apartment, Atlas resting at her feet, and considered the path that had brought her here. Harassment at a festival had become certification for a program that would help hundreds of dogs and handlers. Edited footage designed to destroy her reputation had become training material that would teach appropriate response. Antagonists who had targeted her for entertainment were facing consequences that might prevent them from targeting anyone else. Discipline was not just about controlling responses. It was about channeling outcomes. 6 months later, the Naval Canine Transition Center occupied a renovated facility at the edge of the training complex. Classrooms for instruction, kennels for animals in various stages of integration. Outdoor areas designed to simulate civilian environments where military working dogs would need to function. Kira stood at the front of a classroom, facing 12 students. Some were handlers transitioning out of military service. Others were civilian trainers seeking certification to work with former military dogs. All of them had come seeking knowledge that did not exist in textbooks. The first rule, she said, is respect, not fear, not dominance. respect for what these animals are capable of, and respect for the partnership that makes them safe. Emma sat in the back row, technically too young for the program, but present with special permission as a demonstration assistant. She had grown in the months since the festival, developing the kind of confidence that came from understanding rather than ignorance. The second rule is context. A military working dog is not dangerous by default. They're trained to distinguish between situations that require response and situations that require patience. Your job as a handler is to provide the cues that help them make those distinctions correctly. Roy Garrett had joined the program as a volunteer advisor, bringing 30 years of experience to complement Kira's operational background. He sat in the corner, observing, occasionally adding commentary that bridged the gap between military and civilian understanding. The third rule, Kira continued, is the most important one. You always have the ability to stop. No matter how tense the situation, no matter how threatened you feel, you can always choose de-escalation. And if you can make that choice, your dog will follow your lead. She paused, letting the words settle. Questions? A young handler in the front row raised his hand. Ma'am, what do you do when people don't respect the rules? When they approach without permission or try to provoke a response? Kira smiled slightly. That's a longer conversation. But the short answer is, you stay disciplined. You document. You remove yourself from the situation if possible. You trust that the truth will eventually matter more than the provocation. And if it doesn't? If the truth gets buried under edited footage and internet outrage, then you keep going anyway? Kira's voice carried the weight of experience. Because discipline isn't about winning every battle. It's about staying true to who you are, regardless of what other people do. It's about knowing that your response defines you more than their attack ever could. The class continued for another 2 hours. Practical exercises, demonstration scenarios, the patient work of building understanding that would take months to complete. When the students had departed and the facility had quieted, Kira walked Atlas through the outdoor training area. The evening light painted everything in shades of gold and amber, softening the military precision of the landscape. Roy found her there, standing at the edge of the property, looking out at nothing in particular. Good class today, he said. They're learning. So are you. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets, comfortable in the silence. When I first saw you at that festival, I knew something was different, but I didn't understand what. What do you understand now? That discipline isn't about suppressing who you are. It's about using who you are for something that matters. Kira nodded slowly. Atlas pressed against her leg, seeking contact, offering the wordless support that had carried her through the years of service and months of transition. They mocked me at that festival, she said quietly. They saw a woman with a dog and thought they understood everything about what that meant. They were wrong. They were wrong. She looked down at Atlas, at the animal who had saved her life in Syria, and sat motionless while strangers harassed her in a parking lot. But being wrong doesn't make them evil. It makes them ignorant. And ignorance can be fixed. You really believe that? I have to believe it, because if I don't, then everything I'm trying to build here is pointless. Then military working dogs really are just weapons waiting to be deployed, instead of partners waiting to be understood. Roy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried something that might have been admiration. You know what I keep thinking about? That moment at the festival, when you just stood there and let them push you around. Most people would have reacted, would have defended themselves in ways that felt justified but looked terrible on camera. Discipline. No, something more than discipline. He turned to face her. Purpose. You knew that how you responded mattered more than what they did. You understood that the moment was bigger than your pride or your comfort. Kira looked at him, held his gaze the way she had held Dr. Pritchard's gaze during the evaluation, the way she had held the harasser's gazes during both confrontations. They thought silence was weakness, she said. They thought stillness meant I was afraid. They were wrong about that too. They were wrong about everything. She smiled, the expression small but genuine. But that's okay, because now they know better. And because of them, hundreds of other people will learn the difference between discipline and danger, between control and aggression, between a weapon and a partner. Atlas shifted beside her, his attention drawn by something in the distance. A bird, perhaps, or a sound too subtle for human ears. The automatic alertness of an animal trained to notice everything, combined with the calm patience of a partner who understood when action was unnecessary. What's next? Roy asked. More of this. More students, more dogs. More handlers who need to find their way from military service to civilian life. Kira looked at the facility behind her, at the program she had helped build from the ashes of a confrontation that could have destroyed her. More chances to prove that what we learned in war can serve us in peace. She turned back toward the training center, Atlas matching her stride, Roy falling into step beside them. The sun continued its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in colors that promised renewal. Somewhere in the world, veterans were struggling with transitions they did not know how to navigate. Military working dogs were waiting in kennels, their skills unused, their futures uncertain. People were watching edited videos and drawing conclusions that bore no relationship to truth. But here, in this place, something different was being built. A bridge between worlds. A translation between languages that most people did not know existed. A demonstration that discipline was not the absence of power, but the wisdom to use it correctly. They hit her in front of her dog, and she had turned that moment into a legacy that would outlast the harassment, the videos, the outrage, and the doubt. Because true strength was never about domination. It was about knowing when to act and when to wait. When to speak and when to stay silent. When to fight and when to simply stand still and let the truth reveal itself. They learned that lesson, and because of her, so would everyone else.